it's this is a result of how our minds work sometimes, that we divide things up into boxes and we say, well, there's many different types of meditation, and there's many different types of medicine, modern and traditional, Chinese and Western, all those different things, when in fact there's only one world, and we have limited ways of telling stories about it. So it seems like there's many different things. It's actually just a few things telling it told in a different way. So then you came to the Neijing, and it seemed pretty familiar to you. Yeah.
Right. So I want to ask Mel. Mel, why you study Neijing nature-based medicine? What makes you study nature-based medicine through the Neijing with Dr. Neal? And
No, that's a good question. So I had been in practice just over 10 years. I think slightly before that, I did see Ed speak in Germany, which I think I've touched on before, where he had a different perspective on how the meaning of the channels in Chinese medicine. But around the time that I found his courses and his work, I was reaching a point of disillusionment with my training, both Chinese medicine and functional medicine. So I have a master's degree in each, and I was practicing and I was working on my own health. And I was putting more and more effort into them and coming to the realization that there was something wrong, that there was something missing with them. And it was really hard, in terms of functional medicine. People were asking me to train them, and my patients weren't complaining. I mean, I was somewhat able to help, but I was seeing that there was no there, that there was something missing. And so I kind of declared intellectual bankruptcy a couple of years ago, where I was like, even though I can keep going on this path, people will be happy for me to help them with these lenses, and I could live my life like this. This is not giving me the answers that I want. And a big part of it was that my own experience of life and health and that of my patients was breaking the models too often. So there was just too many exceptions where what was being taught wasn't applicable, it wasn't working. And so around that time, I found Ed Neal's training, and he was able to. I think, I mean, a big key is this being tied to the root of the medicine. So rather it be like just repeat an aphorism that you've heard about Chinese medicine, and it must be true because everyone's saying it. There's this really close connection to the original sources and really understanding what they mean, so that be- things can be applied. That you never break the model. Like if there's one breath and there's one light, then that's always true. There's no exception. But also, if we just stay there, we don't differentiate, it can be hard to make it applicable. It's one thing to sit in meditation and be connected with the one true source of everything, but how do we intervene in the world, or how do we know when to intervene in the world? How do we work with people's stories, and how do we work with their illness and their wellness and so on? And Dr. Neal's perspective and his, I have to say that not only has he refined a certain perspective through years of study, but one can tell that he's also put a lot of attention into learning the craft of teaching, which is actually a separate skill. So it's very enjoyable to learn from him. And I know you're right there. um,
I
but but
agree.
but that I can take what I'm learning. It's not something that you kind of quickly, like you're learning information. You have to let it change you, but that you can take it into the world and apply it. And there's no patient that breaks the model because it's always true. And so, or one thing that Ed has been known to say is like, if you're working with a patient and you're trying to figure out what's going on, you could always take your understanding back to the original breath of the universe, so that you're always taking it back to the source. So I hope that was a little bit rambly, but that's how I found Ed, and it was at this time where I'd invested a lot of time and energy in learning a certain way of doing things and being with them, and then I had to go through this period of a couple of years where actually I was like an infant and was like, I don't care about my license and my degrees, I don't know anything, um, and I'm much happier for that decision.
Oh, that's so kind of you, Mel. Those words, and
That's beautiful. Thank you, Mel.
the That's so interesting. And I've always it's interesting. I've always seen myself as kind of a doctor. I'm always a doctor. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a sinologist. So at the end of the day, I'm always thinking about how to treat patients. And so there is this thing about how do you take these very esoteric ideas about light and breath and then treat someone with lupus, that afternoon. And so in this work, we have the Neijing text, which is our root because it's the root of Chinese medicine. Um, and we also want to say that the root of the Neijing has a root, and it's nature, and that nature has a root, and it's the cosmos. So it's kind of, we go root, root, root. The more you go back to root, the more you can understand things. But so we had to develop over 20 years this idea of what was the Neijing saying, but then this whole other thing called Neijing, nature-based medicine, and that's the procedure of how you put in an idea of how that can be very esoteric about light and breath and other things like that, and take it all the way down to the patient with lupus, because it's without that it's still great, these ideas. But that's actually one of the things that's been hard for the Neijing in particular. People had trouble understanding it also, but what's really been hard for people is to put it into practice in a comprehensive way.